Morning.
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 Candle of Joy, the third Sunday. In a lot of traditions, we have all white here, but in a lot of traditions, the candle of joy is actually a different color. If we were properly liturgical, we would have four purple or three purple and one pink. And I think the reason for that, the liturgical and very serious reason for that, is that when they were gathering the candles, they said, well, okay, well, we have hope, we have peace, and we have love. And then someone said joy, and someone says, no, we don't have a candle. There's no joy in our faith. Why would we get a candle for that? So they had to scramble to get the extra candle for joy, because joy is often not seen as part of our faith. In fact, if you ask people who aren't part of a church, they would say that church was the place that joy goes to die. It is the place where we are told, don't do this, don't do that. And there's this image of faith and church being the place that is constantly telling people what they should or should not do in a rather judgmental way. Religion is seen as more oppressive than liberating. And that is a crying shame. Because it is our faith that lifts us up. It is our faith that liberates us. And yet somehow we have messed that message up and the world does not see. John the Baptist, and when Jesus is talking about him, he says, who did you go out in the wilderness to see? And John the Baptist, and you can see why people might get the image, because John the Baptist wasn't wearing the soft, colorful robes, wasn't coming and saying, hey, let's party at the Jordan. He was coming and telling people to live a life worthy of repentance. He was firm and strong in his faith in calling people to live a life of repentance, but then also of the grace that comes with that. And so John the Baptist is kind of that image of living a faith that matters. But it's not always easy. And maybe that's the thing that throws people, is that our faith calls us to a rich and wonderful life, but not an easy life. And you can even see it with John the Baptist, who Jesus says, no one is more precious than John the Baptist. And where is he when Jesus is saying this? He's in prison. He's been locked up. And so John even is at this point, when he's in prison, starting to wonder. And he says, he sends his disciples to say to Jesus, are you the one? Or are we supposed to wait for someone else? Because John's in prison. And the idea, again, is that when the Messiah comes, the Messiah will set everything right. That's what people want. They want all the problems to be taken away. They want everything to be solved. And we have that list in the Psalm, part of that list in Isaiah, but the blind shall see, the deaf shall hear, the lame shall walk. And a lot of those passages, because that theme kind of follows through in different places in the Bible, and the prisoners shall be set free. And Jesus tells the disciple to go and to tell John, the lame have walked, the dead have risen, the gospel has been preached to the poor, the blind see. I think I may have said that. But what he doesn't mention is the prisoners will be set free. And in this way, he's saying to John, the gospel is happening. The message of what was called is taking place, just not in all the ways we would always want it. In that John wasn't going to be set free, and he ends up being beheaded. So we have this kind of mixed faith. Well, it's not a mixed faith, but this mixed message of there is joy and celebration, but there is hard work, and it won't always be easy, and it won't always go our way. And so it's understandable why we sometimes don't come across as the best sort of like, this is the fun place to be, because it's not always fun. In fact, sometimes it's downright hard. This morning I got a call and I had to share very difficult news with someone. And it's on the Sunday of joy, and I'm like, oh. Our life is a struggle. And there is suffering in our life. But again, our faith lifts us up. It doesn't remove the suffering, but it gives us the strength the strength and the endurance to endure and to to overcome what the life will throw at us. A call to a good life is what we have received, and that call does not waver in the face of suffering, obstacles, oppression, injustice. In fact, we embrace it even more, the obstacles that we face. We embrace it even as the world is trying to push us down. When Jesus came as the Messiah, everyone thought he was going to make everything right. He was going to chase out the Romans. There was going to be a sense of peace and harmony. Everything would blossom. Instead, Jesus comes and he tells the religious leaders, stop being so judgmental and start being more kind and compassionate. He teaches the poor that they have a worthy and place in this world and they are not to be dismissed simply because of their economic status. He tells the blind and the sinners and the tax collectors, they too belong. He comes with a message of joy, but for those sometimes who are in power, it is hard to hear, but those who are oppressed, it truly is a liberating message. So we come here as a church and we are told that we are joyful even as we have the hard work of being a people for justice, being a people for righteousness, being a people that strive to change the world, even as the world would ignore us. Viktor Frankl, he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Did I get the title right? Pam was kind of surprised that she had not talked to me about the book before, but it's a book that she uses a lot. So I've just started to read it, but I don't have it all. So if I misquote it, it's Pam's fault. But Viktor Frankl was someone who was in the concentration camps, and he wrote a book about that experience, and he stresses the whole idea that the importance of faith with suffering, and that even if you have suffering, you still have faith. But one of the things that he said that really struck me is that he said in the concentration camp, not counting those who are sent to the gas chamber, but for all those who are being worked to death, who are not being given warmth or shelter, who aren't being given enough food or water to survive, he said you could not tell who would live and who would die, not based on their physical appearance. So he says it wasn't, trying to figure out who would live and who would die. You couldn't say, oh, the young will live and the old will die, because that was not always the case. You couldn't say that the strong and the healthy would live and those who were more frail would die, because that wasn't always the case. What he said was those who believed that there would be a better life when they were out, that they believed that when they got out, things would be made right and they would be able to live their lives. Those were the people that died. The people that survived were the people that found meaning in the day that they were living, in amongst the concentration camp itself. It wasn't things will be better when. It was, I have a purpose today and I have a life to live today. And they were the ones who found the strength, even in the face of beatings and starvation and cold. They found the strength to go on. His statement is that it was that sense of purpose which gave them life. That sense of there is something today that I am called to do, that I can change and make this day a better day. Not it's going to be better later on, but today I will work at it. They were the ones who survived. And for me, this is part of our message of joy. Even in a place like the concentration camp, because we have been given a purpose. We have been given the message that we are called to do something, and that is joyful. Because we have been created for a reason. God didn't just kind of throw out a bunch of people and say, yeah, do whatever. God has created each and every one of us and have called us to be a part of this world and to make this a better world. To have a part to play in God's kingdom, to to bring joy and hope and peace and love to others. And the fact that God has involved us in this, that is joyful. Because that means each and every day we have a purpose. In that purpose, there is not only meaning and strength, but joy. And we exist not just to get through to something better. We exist because today has something in it for us. Our message of joy isn't maybe the, oh, come down to the Jordan and we're going to have a big party. It's come down to the Jordan and find out that you actually are important, that you have value and that you have stuff to share, that you have a calling to live in this life, that you have purpose. The town of False Hope. For some of you who are new, my apologies. So Advent, I do a 4-part series. It's the only way I can get people to keep coming. And the theme this Advent is the town of False Hope. And False Hope is out in the middle of the desert, and it was built on hope, but all of those hopes have failed. And so they call the town False Hope. And part of the people, their dream is to leave, but other people have found a sense of hope and belonging in this isolated community. And so someone has come and offered to buy up the whole community, and so that caused a rift because there are people who want to accept it and leave, but there are other people who want to stay. And so they have this back and forth. And then last Sunday, they all took a time to listen to each person. And so for the first time, they felt like they were heard regardless of what their opinion was. So at the end of that listening, young Russell runs to the mic because the last person has just sat down. And young Russell says, I have the answer. Now, normally when some young person jumps up to the mic, everyone goes, no, you don't. But everyone was curious because Russell was different. Russell was kind of one of those just bizarre kind of, it was, actually no one really knew how old Russell was. He looked like he was in his mid-teens, but he was probably in his 20s. But Russell was just kind of and he knew something about everything. But he had followed the person who had gone to make the offer to buy the community. When he had been here for 3 days, he had followed around. So everyone thought that Russell actually knew why they wanted to buy this community. And if they knew that, that would give them power. So when Russell got to the mic, they were all saying like, I knew it. And they figured that Russell had probably found some sort of rare earth mineral that was needed to build better cell phones, that's why they wanted to buy the community. And then there was also the theory that they wanted to change the whole community into a reserve for a rare gazelle that was dying. And then there was the idea that it was supposed to be a huge apocalypse sort of shelter where the rich would come. And there was all these theories, and they figured that Russell would have the answer. And so Russell gets up to the thing and he goes, I know what we need. And everyone was quiet and they looked to Russell, and Russell says in that kind of bizarre way of his, we need a Christmas party. And everyone goes, what? No, what? Russell, they said, why are they trying to buy our community? Russell says, no, that's not important. He says, what we need is a Christmas party. And everyone's kind of like, oh man. He goes, no. He says, I have now watched It's a Wonderful Life 8 times in a row, and I realized that the answer is a Christmas party. And people are kind of like, they're starting to, and then Jenny, who is the mayor, gets up and says, I think Russell's onto something. We are going to have a Christmas party a week from now. And it'll be a potluck. The only rule is no barbecue because they've had way too much barbecue lately. So she says, we're going to have a potluck, and I am going to make sure that it's a secret Santa. So everyone that in the town will receive a gift from someone else. I'm going to set that up, she says. And so everyone's kind of like, And then Grumpy Greg. Now, Greg is considered the old grumpy man in the community. And he gets up there and he says, this is just a ploy, so we're not going to sell our property. You're just trying to make us like each other more. At which point his wife, Angela, elbows him and says, or it's a good way to say goodbye. And so both sides were kind of like, okay, maybe it is a good way to end, and we can end this way and we can sell. And those who wanted to say, maybe, we'll like each other more. So again, that great divide of those who wanted to stay and those who wanted to leave, both decided that the Christmas party might have a purpose. So that whole week, they prepared. And people got the names of who they were getting a gift for. And because this was such a small community, everyone knew everyone. And so they could actually think about what they wanted to give. It wasn't just I'll get them a gift card. It was something that they thought, they were encouraged to do something that was personal and representing of that person. Harder, but better. And there was a desert pine by the lake, and they put lights around it. And so the day of the celebration came, the Christmas party, and they all gathered, and they wore little elf hats and stuff, and they came and they sang some songs and stuff, and then they did the gift exchange. And the amazing thing that started to happen with the gift exchange. Now, if you'll remember, there was Robert. Robert was the person in the village who stole stuff. He would go around and he would just steal stuff. And then everyone, if something went missing, they knew that Robert would have it, and they'd go and they'd knock on Robert's door and they say, "May I have back whatever it was that was stolen from my yard?" And Robert would give it back to them, cleaned, washed, fixed, and repaired. Robert had issues. Robert liked to take stuff when people didn't see him, but then he had guilt, and so he'd fix it up, and then when they came, he was relieved to give it back to them. Any other community, Robert would have probably been locked up. But in this community where they were all kind of bizarre and different, Robert fit along. So Robert is the first person to receive a gift, and he receives it from Samantha, who, again, I apologize to people who haven't heard. I have to do more background. Samantha would walk the town at night at 3 a.m. She was a retired cop from Chicago. She couldn't sleep at nights, and so every night she walked the town. And she had Robert, the thief, as she had to give. So she got called up, and everyone had to do and see what everyone was getting. And so Robert gets up, and Samantha gives him a set of lockpicks. And everyone goes, "That doesn't make..." And then she added a note that said, "My bike is locked up beside my house. The chain is skipping a lot, and my brakes aren't grabbing. I am sure the lockpick can work well on the chain." That's all she said. And Robert was like, "Oh." And Robert was really excited to try out the lockpicks and also to fix Samantha's bike so that Samantha could get it back. But then before Samantha could get down, the woman who ran the cafe came up. And every morning she would open up at around 5:36, and her first customer was always Samantha, who had just finished walking around the town. And she got Samantha a beautiful headlamp, like one of those really bright ones that kind of casts around, because 3 times now, Samantha, in her walk through the town, had surprised a skunk and had been sprayed. And then she would show up at the cafe, and the cafe then would reek of skunk for 3 days. So she got Samantha this beautiful headlamp, and Samantha was just joyful, and the owner of the cafe was joyful because now they wouldn't smell like skunk. And it went this way, over and over. Grumpy Greg, who everyone knew, if you didn't know them, you'd wonder, how could someone like Angela, they called her Angelic Angela, marry someone like Grumpy Greg? But everyone knew that Grumpy Greg had a heart of gold. Beside that kind of exterior where he's like, "Arr, arr, arr," he was all marshmallow. And someone got him an ornament that had a little heart of gold. And when his wife came up, they gave her elbow pads because she was constantly elbowing him. But she didn't want to hurt him. And it went on like this. And when finally Jenny, who was the last one, came up, and they gave her a kind of a big fancy mayor chain. If you remember, they didn't even notice that their last mayor had died, and there hadn't been a mayor for like 5 years. So they gave her this big chain so that everyone could remember that she was the mayor. And everyone just was joyful. There were 2 rules for the Christmas party. 1, no barbecue, and 2, you couldn't talk about whether you wanted to stay or go. They did that the time before. Now it was just simply to enjoy each other's presence. And the thing was, they realized that they had a sense of belonging and purpose in that town. And so at the end, as everyone's kind of starting to clean up, Grumpy Greg gets to the mic and he goes, but are we staying or are we going? Because he wants to know. And the whole community turns and looks at him. And he can see a bunch of them have tears in their eyes. They're smiling, they're laughing. He goes, I knew it. We're going to stay, aren't we? One of the beautiful things about a church, when it's working the way it's supposed to, is that not only do we have a sense of purpose to be a part of the kingdom of God, to bring about change, but we have people to walk alongside us when we're doing it. We have people who are going to be with us when things are going well and when things are going poorly. We're not expected to do this on our own. And we have joy even in the face of an insurmountable task, because we know that there are people who care for us, people who walk with us, people to whom we matter. There is a sense of purpose in our community. I am always incredibly grateful that I am part, of our church, but particularly this church. I am painfully aware of my many faults and flaws. And my children will say I'm not aware of all of them, but I'm aware of a big chunk of them. And I am grateful that I am part of a congregation that, if it was just for me, I would fail miserably. But everyone is so gracious and kind. Like the fact that even just this morning, last minute, I'm running around trying to get someone to light the candle of joy, because of course I haven't thought about it ahead of time. In fact, I was driving and I'm like, oh no. But there's room even for someone like me in this community, and there's room for each one of us. We belong. We have a purpose. We have a calling, and it is hard, but it is fantastic work. In fact, it's the best work that we can have to make this world a better place, to bring about the love and the grace and the compassion of God to others. What higher calling could we have? And we get to do it not by ourselves, but with each other. My task for this week, and I share it with you, is to do something, and I know that every week, every day, you are all doing stuff for people around you to make their lives better, to bring about joy, to share compassion and grace. But I ask you to do something different this week. You continue to do that, but find something that's just different for you, but will bring joy to a person, to someone else. Like, don't make it just kind of happenstance, like, oh, you see Don stuck in the ditch, and instead of driving past Don, you actually stop and help him out. Like, that's nice. But I mean, actually think of something ahead of time, not just waiting for Don to be in the ditch. Think of something that you can do this week for someone that gives them a little bit of extra joy. Consider it Christmas preparation. Make it a goal, because it is good for us to do these things, because it reminds us of not only like these small, fun sort of things that we can do, but the lifelong calling that we have to be a people of joy, to be a people that celebrate in what we have received, and we celebrate in what we can give. And there's also just the added aspect that when we do something that gives joy to others, we're giving joy to ourselves as well.